So this week we learn Parsha today A, and it is the Parsha in which we start to learn about the actual process of Yetzias Mitzrayim and Aseres HaMakos. So before we start learning this sugya tonight, the shir is dedicated Leilui Nishmoso Shel Mora Sora Bas Beila, Zechrona Levrocha, the late mother of our dear friend David Hall, who was a steady participant in this shiur. Shetanuach b'sholom al mishkava. Your mother should be a meretz yosef for the entire family. You should only know ach toiv v'chesed, and we should always share b'sedes toivus. So in this week's parsha, we start learning about the Aseres HaMakos, and Bein Hashar Makas Tzfardeim. And the Torah says, "V'yomer Hashem al Moshe bar parav yamartu elav koyom Hashem shalach adami v'yavduni." ומונתו לשלח עניינך נגב כל גבולך בצרדיהם. ושורץ היה אורץ צפרדעים, ויולו ובואו בביסך ובחדר משקפך ועל מיתוסך ובביס עבדך, ובתנורך ובמשערויסך. And we find the Gemara in Pesachim Daf Nun Gimel Omed Beis. Oid zu dorash toides ish romi. Maro Hanani v'shol Mazaria. Shemoso nafshom al Kiddush Hashem. They learned Kal v'choim mitzvadeim. Nevertheless, the Pasuk says, Tanurecho ubi misharasecho. Emosa misharas mitzvah esel tanu, b'shas afiyah. So those frogs went into the cooking, boiling ovens, and they brought about their demise, because that is Ratzon Hashem, and it is from Mitzvadeim that Hananiah, Mishol, Vazariah learned that one is obliged to be moist nefesh, lasis v'tzayin ovev shem hashamayim. So at other opportunities, past years, then some of these shiurim are in Minchas Osha Parshas Vo'era, we dealt with the specifics. How do we learn a Kal V'chomer from Tzvadeim? Tzvadeim are not Barei Das, they're not B'nei Bechira, but today let's just discuss some of the fundamental concepts in the sugya of Kiddush Hashem. When is a Jew required to give away his life to sanctify HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name? That is the mitzvah of V'nigdashti b'torich b'nei Yisrael v'lo yisachalelu eshem kodshi b'torich b'nei Yisrael. So the basic sugi is Sanhedrin Daf Ayin Dalad Omid Beis, and some of it is also in Avodah Zorah Daf Chov Zayin Omid Beis, and various different sources in Shas. Fundamentally, one could say there are three different situations, scenarios in which a Jew is required to give away his life to sanctify God's name, to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. First of all, Gimel Averes Chamur Shebetoira. Every time, anywhere, in any circumstances. Avodah Zorah, Giri Arayas, Shvichas Domem, have the din of Yehereg Va'al Yavar. Number two, B'Shas HaGzeira. If it's the Shas HaGzeira, and it's when the non-Jewish authorities give out a decree, Lahavar es Yisrael al Adas, like it was Birmai Mordechai Yester, like it was in different periods, dark periods of our history, B'Shas HaGzeira, even Arkased the Mesana, even on a Minig Yisrael, the din is Yehereg Val Yavar. And number three, Befarhesia. If it's B'fnei Soram Yisrael, always. So these are the three different situations, different cases in which the halacha of Yehereg Va'al Yavar applies. In all the other situations, and in all other Avedas, the din is Yavar Va'al Yehereg. So, first stage in today's shiur, we deal with a very fundamental question. The halacha of Gimel Avedas Chamuros, is this halacha similar to the other two, Shas HaGzeira or Farhesia? Or maybe Gimel Avedas Chamuros has nothing to do with V'nigdashti b'torich b'nei Yisrael. It has nothing to do with the concept of Kiddush Hashem. It is just that these Avedas have Chumra Yisera. All the other Avedas do not override Pikuach Nefesh. These Avedas do override Hatzolas Nefoshes. So regarding all the other mitzvahs, we have the concept of a Chayvem V'lo Shemesbem. And many times, I think, in the short period that we have this year, Sunday night, I think more than once we discussed the concepts of Pikuach Nefesh. Regarding these Gimel Avedas Chamuros Shebetoira, Mishum Chumrosam, because these are so fundamental and so unique and so important in Yahadus, in Yiddishkeit, they override Pikuach Nefesh, and that is why they're Yehereg Val Yavar. It has nothing to do with V'nigdashti b'torich b'nei Yisrael. V'nigdashti b'nei Yisrael is a Kiddush. When we are in a Chilul Hashem situation, and the other side of the same coin in a Kiddush Hashem situation, then regardless of which mitzvah we're dealing with, all the mitzvahs, b'shas anxiety yereh v'yaver, feres yereh v'yaver. But given Avedas Chamura Shebetoira has nothing to do with Kiddush Hashem. It just has to do with the level of severity of these Gimel Avedas. That is a fundamental machlokes between the Rambam and the Ramban. So let's start off with Rashi alak Torah. V'negdashti b'toich b'nei Yisrael. Rashi says that the kavanah is Mesoyer nafshecho al Kiddush Hashem, and Rashi alak Torah writes Gimel Avedas Chamura Shebetoira, or Gzeira, or Fahesya. So Rashi does clearly seem to indicate that Gimel Avedas Chamura Shebetoira, it is only because V'negdashti b'toich b'nei Yisrael, and that is clear in the Rambam. Hilchas Yesod HaTorah Perikei Halacha Aleph, Rambam Sefer HaMitzvos, Lo Ta'aseh Mitzvah Gimel, which is the mitzvah of V'lo Yisachalalu Es Shem Kotchei, and as usual, Sefer HaChinuch follows in the footsteps of the Rambam. It is only in a handful of the Taryag mitzvahs in which the Sefer HaChinuch sides with the Ramban. In the vast majority of mitzvahs, he always follows in the footsteps of the Rambam, and here as well. Sefer HaChinuch, Mitzvah Reish, Tzadik Vav. So these three sources, Rashi al Torah, the Rambam, two different sources, Sefer HaChinuch, they say, there is no such a thing, Yeherig Val Yaver, only in the context of V'negdashti b'toich b'nei Yisrael. So Gimel Avedas Chamura Shebetoira, Shedino Yeherig Val Yaver, that is because V'negdashti b'toich b'nei Yisrael, V'lo Yisachalalu Es Shem Kochi. The Ramban in Sefer HaMalchamus, Sanhedrin and the Fine Dalet, Chidushe Haran on the spot. They say, no. These three Avedas, Dino Mihereg Valyaver, Mishum Chumrasam. And the Ramban quotes the Gemara. How do we know Avedas Oriereg Valyaver? Because the Pasuk says, V'yahavto, Hashem Elokecho b'chol avavcho b'chol nafshecho afilo noitles lavshecho. And the Pasuk refers to Ahavas Hashem. Idol worshipping, Avodah Zorah goes totally against Ahavas Hashem. And it is from the Pasuk b'chol nafshecho that we learn afilo noitles nafshecho. And then the Gemara goes on and said it in the Fine Dalet, how do we know Shvichas Domim is Yehereg Valyaver? And the Gemara says, we don't need a Pasuk, it's a Svora. Ma'achos is the Dome de Dach Sumiktvei. Dil me Dome de Dei Sumiktvei. So how would a person assume that he is allowed to take another life to save his life? So that is a Svora. And then the Gemara learns, Shvichas Domim from Gilead Rayis. In a hekesh, bozeh v'limad al zeh. And therefore the Ramban and the Ran argue, this has nothing to do with Chilul Hashem or with Kiddush Hashem. Chilul Hashem and Kiddush Hashem only have to do with Shas HaGzeira, Befarhesia, that's a Chilul Hashem Shemayim. But these Gimel Avedas Chamuras, even B'tzina, even Shelo B'Shas HaGzeira, it is just because we learn either from Svarim or from Psukei HaTorah. These three Avedas stand apart. And that's why they are defined, Gimel Avedas Chamura Shebetoira, Shedinam Yehereg Ve'al Yara. Would there be a nafka min al halacha? We find another rishon that sides with the Ramban and the Ran, and that is Sefer HaYareim in Mitzvah Tov Gimel. And the Yareim was one of the Balei HaTosfos, Rabbi Elazar Memetz, Gedorei Tzarfas, and he was one of the Balei HaTosfos, Sefer HaYareim Tov Gimel, similar to the Ramban and the Ran. Would there be an nafka min halacha? I think there would be two nafka minas halacha, but this makes our discussion, our shiur, somewhat complex and complicated. One nafka min halacha would be, what is the din of Gimel Avedas Chamura Shebetoira when the goyim have no intention of forcing us to be over Avedas? It's not that they want to tear us away from our Torah and our tradition. L'hanoas atzman, for some reason, l'hanoas atzman. L'hanoas atzman, obviously, there would be no case of Chilul Hashem or Kiddush Hashem. But if it's just chumras achet, why would it make a difference whether it's hanoas atzman or not hanoas atzman? It's these three Avedas are so chomer, they're so harsh, that they override pikuach nefesh. So that l'choyre would be a nafka minute. And that's a machlokes, the Ramban and Sefer HaMorah, Rabbeinu Zerachia Halevi, who was the Machaber of Sefer HaMorah. and it's an identifying dalet. So the Balamor says, Lanoas Atzmon mutar. It's hard to find a scenario of Lanoas Atzmon by Avodah Zorah or even by Gili Arayis. Shvichas Domim, I think everyone would agree. It's no difference what the motive is, whether it's Lahavir Aradas or Lanoas Atzmon, because that's a svara. Machos is the Dama de Dachsel Miktvei. So the Machloikis, the question would only apply to Gili Arayis or Avodah Zorah. So the Balamor says, if it's not that they want to tear us away from our Messiah, from our Torah, from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, then there would be no Issa, even regarding Shvichas Domim, or not Shvichas Domim, Avodah Zorah or Gili Arayis. The Ramban says no, makes no difference, Lanoas Atzmon, or doesn't matter what their intention is. So the Ramban obviously is Shitosai. Because according to the Ramban, it's Chumra Sachet. And it's a Chumra Sachet, makes no difference why, what their motive, what their intention is. These are Avedas Chamuras that override Pekuach Nefesh. The Balamora obviously would side with the Rambam. No. The din of Yeherek V'Liavar is always because of the Nigdashti B'Turchman Yisrael. V'lo Yisachar Lo Shem Kochi. And therefore, if it's the Lanoas Atzmon, it is not defined as a Chel Hashem, then even Avedas Chamuras would be set aside, pushed aside because of Pikuach Nefesh. So why does this become complicated? Because the Rambam, Yesod HaTorah, Perkei Halacha Gimel, says Beferush that even Lanoas Atzmon, it's Asur. But isn't the Rambam the one that says, as I quoted before, that Gimel Avedas Chamuras, Dinam Yeherek V'Liavar, because of V'Nigdashti B'Toich B'nei Yisrael. So if it is V'Nigdashti, why would we say even Lanoas Atzmon is also? One will argue, one must assume that according to the Rambam, because these Avedas are so fundamental and so important in Yiddishkeit, even if you're over, when nobody is trying to tear you away from Torah, from tradition, from a Kodesh Baruch Hu, it still would be defined as a Chel Hashem. A Jew that is a Magal Arayis or Oived Avodah Zorah, no matter when, how, and why, it is always defined as a Chel Hashem. Even if he is forced to do so, Lanoas Atzmon, it still would be defined as a Chel Hashem. That is the way we must try to explain the Rambam. So one nafkamin in the Machlokes between Rambam and Ramban, and the various different Rishonim that side with each of these giants, Gedolei Olam, the Rambam and the Ramban. So one nafkamin would be, if we are forced, if a Jew is forced to be over the Avodah Zorah or Magan Arois, but the one that forces him has no intention of tearing him away for a Torah, I don't know what the scenario would be. Crazy scenarios, crazy things happened in our history, in our relationships with our masters from Umes Uolam. So the nafkamina would be when it is Lanoas Atzmon with no intention of tearing us away from Torah. And the other nafkamina would be Gimel Avayis Chamosha B'Torah, and a person didn't stand in his soyin, and he was not moise nafshoy. V'hishtachav eletzelem, v'gila arayis. Is he nanash? Is he to be penalized, punished? Or would we say, oines rachmana patrei? So if we say it is only because of V'nigdashti B'Turchman Yisrael, v'lo tzachar lo Hashem kochi, that the din is Yerek V'Liavar, then the svara would be, he's not nanash, he's not chayav misa. Because regarding Avodah Zorah or Gili Arayis, he's an oines rachmana patrei. What was he over? He wasn't over on Avodah Zorah. He wasn't over on Gili Arayis. He was over on V'nigdashti. He was over on Tzachar Hashem Kodesh. There is no Einish Misa on V'nigdashti or Tzachar Hashem Kodesh. There's an Einish Misa on Gili Arayis, Avodah Zorah, Shvichas Domim. But regarding the Etzem Avera of Avodah Zorah, Shvichas Domim, he's an Einish Rachmana patrei. That is the opinion of the Rambam. So the Rambam clearly says in Perikei Yesod HaTorah, even though Gimel Avayis Chamosha B'Torah Dinam Yeherek V'Liavar, but if the person Ovar V'Loi Neherek, he's not chayiv misa. The Rambam is shitosai, according to the Rambam, and the Rambam clearly explains he's an oinus. And as an oinus, he bears no responsibility. And he's not chayiv ba'oinish. But he was over on the mitzvah saseveri. That's the b'derech meisor, and on the lavav, v'lo yisachar l'shem kodshi. But these mitzvahs and averis have no oinish misa, and therefore, according to the Rambam, poto. Kiddush eran, and that very same source, Sanhedrin the Fine Dalet, quotes one of the Rishonim, Rabbeinu David, and he says, chayev misa, and that is because the Ran l'shitosai, according to the Ran, Gimel averis chamor shebetoira, dino miherek v'liaver mishum chumras achet. So what was he over? He wasn't over on V'nigdashni, on V'lo Yisacharalu. He was over on Avodah Zorah, he was over on Gili Arayis, and that is why he is Chayiv Misa. So just like in the first Nafkamina we had a problem with the Rambam, in the second Nafkamina we have a problem with the Ramban, because the Ramban says, Ovar V'loi Neherek Potu. But the Ramban is the Morah D'Shmaitzer that says, Gimel Averes Chamura Shebetoira, Dinam Yeherek V'Yava Mitzad Chumras Avera. Not Mitzad Kiddush Hashem and Chilul Hashem. So why would he be Potter? One must assume, yes, these Gimel Averes override Pikuach Nefesh. But nevertheless, if the person was over, he is an oinus. And we would need to be mechadish, and it truly would be a chiddush. In these Gimel Averes, oinus is not matir, but it is poiter. And this would be a big chiddush, because memonefshech, if it's not matir, why would it be poiter? Because at the end of the day, he's defined as an oinus. And if he's an oinus, it's not a barunshin. But Mrs. Torah is, you need to refrain from doing these avedas, even in a situation of oinus. So the lashon of Chazal is oinus rachmona patrei. And where do we learn this fundamental halachas? Oinus rachmona patrei. Velanaro lo yisasa davar. Tzaku hanaro ve'ein moishiala. It is from this pasuk by Nara Hamarosa that we learn oinus rachmona patrei. So the pasuk refers to ptur, not to issa v'heter. Obviously, that woman, that girl, the question wasn't issa v'heter. She was coerced. She didn't have the means to do anything about it. So the question there is chayvei poto, and the pasuk says v'lanarei sasadava. We do not penalize. We do not punish her. Why? So the fundamental of Allah, the fundamental halacha of oinus is ptur, not issa v'heter, but rather chiyuv and ptur. So according to the Ramban, we must say, yes, gimel avedas chamura shebetoira dinam yeherek v'alyava. Because there are two different types of oinus, two different oinus situations. One is like v'lanaro le'sasa davar. Sometimes a person is forced to do something and he cannot say no. I mean, it is just imposed on him by force. And he doesn't have the liberty or the possibility to refuse. But in other situations, a threat of death is defined as oinus. And that is the situation of Gimel Averes Chamur Shebetoira. That is the situation of Shas Gzeira. That is the situation of the stories we learn in Gittin Daf Nun Zayin about Jewish children that were forced to bow down to Atzelem and to be Oved Avodah Zorah. They refused and they were killed. And that is a form of Kiddush Shem. So that's a different type of oinus. It's not the same oinus as V'lanaro lo yisasa davar. So the Ramban's opinion is, regarding Gimel Averes Chamura Shebetoira, the din is Yeherek V'alyaver. But if he didn't stand in a soyin and he was over, he is still as poto medin oinus. So, but these Gimel Averes Chamuras, oinus paters, but oinus is not matio. So he was over b'cheit, but nevertheless, ein oinenash, ein chayav misa, because oinus rachmana patrei. So in Minchas Osher, ala Torah, I dealt with the concept of Einus, and I brought various different sources. That Einus is not only a ptur, a heter. I brought the Chemda Shloima. Chemda Shloima was the Rav in Warsaw, in Varsha, 200 years ago. He was a friend of the Nesivos and Rabbi Kiva Eiger, and they corresponded a lot. Shal Shuvas Chemda Shloima Yodei Malamet Ches. Chemda Shloima says, Einus is not only a ptur. When a maisa is performed in coercion, it is not even defined as a maisa. So it goes beyond the question of chiyuv and ptur, heter, and iser. In Avodah Zorah, Daf Nun Daled, the Gemara says when a person was forced l'shtachavos lebehema, the behema doesn't have a din of nevad, and it's mutar b'hakrova kikorban, even though nevad is also legvoya. But this is not nevad, because the person that bowed down to the behema was forced to do so, and therefore it's not nevad. And Tosfos asks, but it's yerek bal yavar. There's already yerek bal yavar. And the Ritva says, yes, yerek bal yavar regarding the gaver. But at the end of the day, it was an oinus, and therefore the behemoth does not have a din of avodah zarah. So in the Ritva, explaining the Gemara of avodah zarah, Daf Nun Daled, we find this intrinsic contradiction, l'chayra. On one hand, it's yerek bal yavar, but on the other hand, the basic halacha of oinus still applies. Yerek bal yavar regarding the gaver. Yeherig bal yaver means there's an isar, but it's still an oinus. And it is oinus in the aspect of the behemoth is not nesa l'gavoy, it's not nesa l'krov, even though nevad is also l'korban. So it would be no wonder to say the din is yeherig bal yaver, but b'di eved avar v'lo neherag poto memisa, because after all he was an oinus. So this is regarding the Machlokes Rambam, Ramban, and other Rishonim dealing with the question, given Avedas Chamosha B'Torah Shedinam Yehereg Bal Yavar, is that also part of V'nigdashti B'Torach B'nei Yisrael V'lo Yisechareru Hashem Kodshi, or no? Those mitzvahs only apply to Shas Exera, to Farhesia, but the din of given Avedas Chamosha B'Torah is just Mishum Chumer Sachet. Nothing more. It has nothing to do with V'nigdashti B'Torach B'nei Yisrael. An interesting question I spoke about and I wrote about. So there are Gimel Avedas Chamosha B'Torah. Avodah Zorah, Gilya Rais, Shvichas Damim. L'chayra, they all three have the same Dargas HaChumra. But if one does have to choose between the three, and you will have to be over an Avodah Zorah, Gilya Rais, or Shvichas Damim. Is there any priority? Libi Yoimari. I haven't seen anybody speak about this, but Libi Yoimari. That if worse comes to worse, and we do have to choose between the three, we would rather do Avodah Zorah, Gilya Rais, before Shvichas Damim. So, could I have a Rambam Ahavo? And let us have Zmanim as well. Thank you, Rabbi Isaacson. So when the Rambam deals with the concept of Pikuach Nefesh, I want to quote two halachas. One is in Perek Aleph of Hilchas Mila. Halacha Yud Ches. When the Rambam brings the din of Tinok Shemesu Echov Machmas Mila. 2 children died after circumcision, after Mila. We do not do Mila to the others. So the Rambam writes, it's actually in the previous halacha, halacha Yud Zayin Perek Aleph, if there's any reason to be afraid that a child might perish. By Mila, tzorech lazor b'dvorim el harba, ve'ein malan elo yelad she'ein bo shum choili, shesakonas nefoshes doiches ha'koil, ve'efshar lamul le'achar הזמן, ואי אפשר להחזיר נפש אחד מישראל לעולם. So the Rambam writes, why does Pikuach Nefesh override Mila? And why wouldn't we perform Mitzvah Mila even if a child is ill and we might be jeopardizing his life? שסכונס נפושס דויכס הכל, ואפשר לא מולי אחר הזמן, ואי אפשר להחזיר נפש אחד מישראל לעולם. Why does the Rambam need to explain this? And why doesn't he just simply quote the Pasuk v'chai ben v'lo shiyomis ben? The din is pikuach nefesh is doicha mila. So the Rambam, as his minig is in many different sources, he adds on tam v'tavlin milibo yagodru medate harachova, and he explains, well, you could do mila at another time, but maybe with this child we won't do mila at another time. So I would add on to the Rambam, you could do mila at another time, you could do mila with a different child, you could do mila in another place. Nothing is final in this world. Everything is about tikkun. אי אפשר להחזיר נפש אחד מישראל לעולם. So if you're over on Avodah Zorah, you could do tshuva. You're over in Gili Arayas. You could do tshuva. But if you took a person's life, אי אפשר להחזיר נפש לעולם. And the Rambam in Perek Beis of Hilchos Shabbos, when the Rambam quotes the din that Pikuach Nefesh Doicha Shabbos, once again, quite interesting. The Rambam here also adds on tam v'tam v'tavlin. He doesn't just bring the halacha that Pikuach Nefesh is Doicha Shabbos. So the Rambam Perek Beis Halacha Gimel Hilchos Shabbos, when the Rambam deals with the din of Sekonos Nefoshes, Pikuach Nefesh Doicha Shabbos, also lehismamea bechilul Shabbos lachol sheyesh b'sekonos, shenemar, asher yasa oisam ha'odam v'chai behem, v'lo sheyomes behem, holemadeto, she'ein mishpetei ha'torah nekoma b'yolam, elo rachamim v'chesed v'sholom ba'olam. So the Rambam quotes the Pasuk v'chai behem v'lo sheyomes behem, but the Rambam adds on ein mishpetei ha'torah nekoma b'yolam, elo rachamim v'chesed v'sholom b'yolam. So I think in a situation in which, to our terrible despair and dismay, but it is a situation in which we know that either a person will be over the Avodah Zorah or he will kill another, we would say, Avodah Zorah, Gili Arayis come before Shvichas Domim. And I think I have somewhat of a raya. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, Dav Zayin, an amazing Gemara, when Aaron, as if turned a blind eye and Chetu Egel, and Aaron is confronted by Moshe, how did you let this happen? And Aaron apologizes, and the Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Dav Zayin Amud Aleph, Ro'o Chur Zavuach Lefonov. He saw that Chur was murdered. And he said, if they're going to kill me as well, they will never have tshuva. Im Yehoreg b'migdash Hashem Kohen v'Navi, then they will never be able to make up for this. And that is why he turned the blind eye and he let them do the egel. And the question is, Avodah Zorah and Shvichas Domim, what's the difference? They're both Yehereg Val Yavar. So why did Aaron let them do the egel? And why didn't he try to destroy the egel and fight them? So obviously this would prove that Shvichas Domim is chomer tfei than chet u'egel. But maybe it is just because of the posuk im yehorig b'migdash Hashem kohen v'navi. But who says that they can't do tshuva on that? If they could do tshuva on avodah zorah. So l'cha'oira, this Gemara proves Aaron had to choose. Would I turn a blind eye and let them do the egel? Would I fight them and they might kill me? And he decided better let them do the egel. They shouldn't be over once again on ibud nefesh and on shfichas dam. One might argue if they would kill Aaron, then neither would he be successful in preventing them from doing the egel. So that would be shfichas dam on top of chet egel. Maybe. But Aaron would have a fair chance of preventing them from doing the egel if he would stand up against them. And nevertheless, he was choshish. They might kill him, and that would be an avera which tshuva will never be able to rectify. So maybe this Gemara would prove that shvichas damim, out of the gimel averas chamura shebetoyra shvichas damim hu achomer biyoser, and because efshar lahachzir nefesh echod miyisrael biyolam, like the Rambam writes in Perek Aleph, halacha yud zayin of Hilchos Milah. But this is a question which I did not see any of the poskim or any of the Rishonim deal with. Discussing the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. Does one make a bracha on Kiddush Hashem? We do not find any source in the Rishonim besides one source. Rabbi Menachem Rekanati wasn't known as a great commentator in the Rishonim. He was be'ikar known for his Kabbalah, one of the great Mekabalim of the Rishonim, and he has a Sefer Piskei Halachos. And in Sefer Piskei Halachos of the Rekanati, he says that when a person is Mekadosh Shem Shemayim by giving away his life to sanctify Kodesh Baruch Hu's name, Shmoy HaGodol Yisborach, he should say a bracha. The Rekanati doesn't formulate the bracha. Shlo HaKodesh Sharu Oisius, Ois Aleph, Emes Ve'emuno. The Shlo says, when a person is Mekadosh Shem Shemayim, and the Goyim will take his life, he should say Asher Kedishano, B'mitzvoisov, Mitzivono, Lekadesh Shmoy HaGodel, or Lekadesh Shem Shemayim. But this is halacha we do not find in any other source, but the Shlo quotes the Rekanati. And the Shlo has an interesting discussion, and he does go into various svoras. The Rishonim deal with the question. Obviously, we don't say a bracha on each and every one of the mitzvahs we are Mekayim. So what's the rule? What's the klal? Which brachas, which mitzvahs do we say a bracha, and on which mitzvahs do we not say a bracha? The two most important sources dealing with this question are Tshuvas HaRashba, Chelek Aleph Siman Yud Ches, and Abu Darham. In Berches HaMitzvahs V'Nisucham, Shar Gimel and Sefer Abu Darham. Other Rishonim, the Rosh and the Ran and Psachim Dav Zayin, deal with a secondary question. Nusach HaBrocha. Which mitzvahs do we say al, like we say al achilas matzah, al achilas morah, and which mitzvahs do we say le, like we say leishav besuka lehis atev betzitzis? That is the question that the Rosh and the Ram deal with, but the Rashba and Abu Darham deal with another question. Which mitzvahs do we say a bracha, and which mitzvahs do we not say a bracha? So the Shlo briefly brings various different opinions, and the conclusion of the Shlo, following in the footsteps of the Rekanati, is Kiddush Hashem, we do say a bracha. And the Shlo discusses the minig right after Kriya Shema Shelefnei Psuke de Zimra, Atohu Liyolam, and the siyum of the bracha is Borach HaMekadosh Shmoi Berabim, and according to some of the Rishonim, we say Borach Atu Hashem HaMekadosh Es Shemoi Berabim, and the Shlo brings this as a source that we say a bracha on Kiddush Hashem. Well, this bracha definitely is Berachas HaShevach. It's not Berachas HaMitzvah, so that would not be a raya. this bracha has nothing to do with Yeherek Val Yavar. Maybe it does. Some early sources say that the nusach of this bracha that we do not find in Chazal was formulated after the Gezeres Shmad, in the days of the Rishonim in Spain. That is when the bracha was instituted, and that is why it is juxtaposed to Kriya Shema. So this is not really Kriya Shema Shachas. This is the minig that the Tur brings in Simon Mem Vav, that we say Kriya Shema before Psukkah de Zimmer, Samach Labech Shachar. But we do say this bracha right next to Kriya Shema because it is associated, in a way, with Gezeres Shmad and with the Mesiras Nefesh of Klal Yisrael. But still, it's not the Berachas HaMitzvah. And this is a minag. And most of the Shonim say we do not even mention Shem Shemayim. We just say, as our minhag is, Baruch HaMekadosh, Shemoy Berabim, but we don't say Baruch Atu Hashem. But nevertheless, this is the opinion of the Shlok. And why do I think it's a big Kiddush that we do not find in any other early source? Because one of the fundamental Yesodas in Berachas HaMitzvah is we do not say Berachas HaMitzvah only on a mitzvah sheyesh ba ma'isa. And in Kiddush Hashem, to our dismay, it's always Shev al Taisa. The Goyim are the ones that do the Maisim. Sorkos Besorei ben Seika Shabarzel, story of Rabbi Kiva at the end of Masechet Brochas and Bavli Ani Yerushalmi, and Avodah Zorah of Yud Ches Lebchina ben Toradian, Ekifu bechavilas moires vetzitu be'emesaur. So when exactly would the Yid that's being destroyed, killed, when would he say a bracha? It's not a mitzvah sheyesh ba ma'isa. And therefore, why would there be a bracha?
During the Maaseh Hatzlah, the people were killing each other. They shouldn't get. They said brachos then.
Are we allowed to be proactive and commit suicide or kill others to prevent avodah zarah? That is nowhere to be found in Chazal, but we do find the discussion in Rishonim. Beis Yosef Bedek Abayis and Yoredei Simen Kuf Nun Vav brings a story that happened by Yemei Bali Atoises. It is also brought in Dazakenim Bali Atoises and Parshas Noach and the Pasuk Shoifech Dam Ha'odam Ba'odam. So, in the days of the Bali Atoises, there was a machlokes B'shas Gezeres Shmad. One of the Bali Atoises said that we are to take the lives of children if those children will fall into the hands of the anti-Semites, that they will be forced l'shtachavos l'tzelem. And Ba'asakeinim, as well as the Beis Yosef, bring a machlokes between Rabbeinu Tam and Rabbeinu Ephraim and Bali Atoises. And the conclusion of the Beis Yosef is, no, we should not do that. We should never destroy another person's life, even in a situation in which we might be forced to be oived avodah zarah. But the classical example and the classical case of Kiddush Hashem is when we are passive. And those that threat to destroy us, they are the ones that are active. And when performing a mitzvah without a ma'isa, we do not say Berachos HaMitzvah. So that's a fascinating tshuva of Rabbi Kiva Eger, tshuva of Rabbi Kiva Eger, Siman Tes. Rabbi Kiva Eger deals with the Magen Avraham. And the Magen Avraham says that if a person leaves his house for a few days or a week or a month or however long it may be, when he comes back home, he needs to say a brocha, Asher Kedushono b'mitzvosa v'tzivonu lodo b'bayis sheyesh boi mezuzah. And the argument of the Magen Avraham is mezuzah chavis sadar. So we're not leaving in the house, you put them in a mezuzah. So if you left your house for an hour and you went to the Beis HaMedrash, you're still chayiv b'mezuzah. But if you leave your house for a few days, and right now you're not living in your house, you put them in a mezuzah. So the Magen Avraham argues, when I come back home, then I am once again chayiv b'mezuzah. So the Magen Avraham says, if you're nechnes l'chachiv, you need to say a bracha. So what bracha would he say? The mezuzah is up already. So the Magen Avraham says he would say the bracha, lodo b'bayis shesh b'mezuzah. But nobody does that. Did you ever hear a person saying when he comes back from a vacation or from a trip or whatever, he wasn't home a few days to say a bracha, lodo b'bayis shesh b'mezuzah? So that's not the meaning. So Rabbi Kiva Ega, la'acha chasim esyach kodshoy. Semetes writes, Isi beBerkei Yosef. And to me, this Berkei Yosef is so poshut and so fundamental. V'yev shalach like Olav. So Rabbi Kiva Ega says, there is no brocha, only b'maisa mitzvahs. So when you come back home and you move into your house, that's not a maisa mitzvah. And therefore one could only say a brocha al kviyas hamezuzah. And that's why ein halacha k'divrei Magen Avraham. So if we accept this basic principle, then there would be no brocha on Kiddush Hashem because it's not a maisa mitzvah. Yes?
He was allowed to take off the mezuzah?
We're not dealing with a situation.
So it's not a new gear.
We're not dealing with a situation in which he removed the mezuzah. He just left the house and he's coming back. If he did remove the mezuzah, everybody would agree when he puts the mezuzah back on, he could make a brocha. But in that case, the nusach would be like a mezuzah. The Magen Avraham wouldn't say lodo b'bayis sheyesh b'mezuzah. So the Magen Avraham is clearly dealing with a case in which he did not remove the mezuzah. No, that would not be Taseh Olam and Osu. No. Taseh Olam and Osu would be in a situation in which it's not a bias. And when you make the bias, there is a mezuzah. Here, it's a bias. It just isn't the chiyuv because you're not living in the house. That has nothing to do with Taseh Olam and Osu. So I just want to bring Rabbi Kiva Eger, who quotes the Berkei Yosef and agrees with the Berkei Yosef, that one of the Yesodis in Berachas HaMitzvah is we do not say Berachas HaMitzvah only on a mitzvah sheyesh b'maisa. And that l'chayra would go against the Shlah and the Rekanati that say, you say a bracha on Kiddush Hashem. Maybe one might argue. So yes, mitzvahs that a person is makayim in a totally passive way do not necessitate a bracha. Mitzvahs Kiddush Hashem, there is no Maisa Mitzad HaYisrael, but it's a very dramatic Maisa Mitzad Atzmai. After all, he's being killed, he's being destroyed, he's being burned, he's being tortured. So maybe that would be defined as a Mitzvah Sheyesh B'Maisa, even though Mitzad, the one that is Mekayim the Mitzvah, he's not doing the Maisa, but it would be defined as a Mitzvah Sheyesh B'Maisa. So I think the Shlah Kodesh, out of his tremendous Kiddusha and Tahara, and out of his feeling, Kiddush Shem Shemayim is the greatest mitzvah. It's the greatest chus. Chazal say, Michitzoson lefonim mimchitzoson shemalachei yashoris. So how could it be that on a mitzvah like this there would be no bracha? So it's more out of his shalheres eish kodesh in his heart, that he felt that there should be a bracha. But dealing with halachic definition, l'choire it would be a mitzvah she'ein kiyuma alidei ma'isa, and in that case it would be no bracha. Many times I stand here and I teach that the fact that Rishonim don't say a certain halacha proves that that halacha doesn't apply. Would that be an argument in our case? I don't think so. I don't think that would be an argument. After all, the situations of Kiddush Shem Shemayim b'moisoi were never very common. We are the only people in history who had these shaylas at all. But still, we wouldn't expect all the Rishonim dealing with Berachas HaMitzvahs to deal with the question, what bracha do we say on Kiddush Hashem? Loi makdim inish paranusa nafshay. It is not a mitzvah which we are mekayim as a routine, neither Seder Hayom nor Chagim v'moyadim. It's not part of the natural routine of Jewish life like mitzvahs milah and all the other mitzvahs. After all, it is a mitzvah which we hope we will never need to be mekayim, and it happens once in generations, and therefore I don't think it would be a wonder. So why doesn't the Rambam say what bracha we say on Kiddush Hashem? First of all, the Rambam usually only quotes what he finds in Chazal. And in Chazal, we do not find this bracha. But I think even other Rishonim, I don't think it would be a wonder why don't the Rishonim deal with this question. So the earliest source that does deal with the question is the Rabbeinu Menachem Rekinati, and then the Shlo Kodesh, and many later Achronim quoting the Shlo, quoting the Rekinati, but we do not find this discussion in many early sources, as I explained. And L'chorah mitzad Gidrei HaHalocha, one would say one should not make a brocha. Another fundamental principle that we find in Tshuvas HaRashba, I quoted before, Chelek Aleph Siman Yud Ches. The Rashba says, why don't we say a brocha on tzedakah and Gemilas HaSodom? And the Rashba writes that every mitzvah that is totally b'das achedim, we can't say a brocha. Because maybe at the end of the day, I won't be Mekayim the mitzvah. So that would be another argument not to say a brocha on Kiddush Hashem. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe there will be an ace. Maybe the goy will regret it. Maybe he'll have Heru Tshuva. So there's an amazing Yerushalmi in Masechet Shviyos. Yerushalmi tells about a non-Jew that threatened the Jew. And he told him, if you're not going to cut off this peach from the tree, then I'm going to kill you. I want to force you to be Machal Shabbos. And the Yisrael was Moise Nefesh. And he said, I will not be Machal Shabbos. Go ahead. And the guy put the sword back into the sheath. Sheath, is that what it's called? Sheath. And the guy put down the sword. And he told her, I want you to know, if you would be Machal Shabbos, I would kill you. Because as a Jew, you have no respect for your religion. Now that you refuse to be Machal Shabbos, I respect you and you will live. That's an interesting story. To our dismay, usually it didn't end that way. But sometimes it did. So according to the Tshuvas HaRashba, any mitzvah that is totally b'das achedim, it's not within your power. You're always dependent on others. You don't say a brocha. And in this case, we really hope that we will not be Mekayim the mitzvah at the end. So that's another reason not to say a brocha on Kiddush Hashem. So this is an interesting discussion. So many generations of Jews had to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim b'Moisam. We need to be Mekadesh Shem Shemayim b'Chayenu. And the Rambam in Perikei of Hilchos Yesod Torah brings other interpretations in V'nekdashti b'Torach b'nei Yisrael. One of them is the Gemara at the end of Masechet Yoma. When a person learns Torah, v'dibura b'nachas ha'mabriyas, v'masor v'matone be'emuno, habriyas, מה אומרים עליו? ראו זה שלום התורה, כמה נועם מעשיו, כמה מתוקנים דרכיו. אשרף שלום התורה, אשרי רבי שלום התורה, אשרי יואב שלום התורה, ונמצא שם שמיים מסייב על ידוי. And if a person learns Torah, ואין דיבורה מנחס המבריאס, ואין מסוי ומתוני באמונה, what do people say about him? ראו זה שלום התורה, כמה מקלקולים דרכיו, כמה מכאורה מעשיו, אוי לא שלום התורה, אוי לא אוהב שלום לתורה, So Baruch Hashem, nobody demands from us to be over the Vedas, and nobody threatens to kill us if we aren't over on Avedas. But that doesn't mean that we don't have the mitzvah of Nikdashti b'Torach b'nei Yisrael, and we don't have the Aveda lo yisachalalu Hashem kadshay. These mitzvahs and Avedas have different interpretations, and one of them is Shiahei Shem Shumayim Misahev Al Yodcha. So this week we learn Parshas Re'eh, and as I said, the process of Yetzias Mitzrayim and Geulas Mitzrayim starts, and at the very beginning of the Parsha we learn V'yedaber Elokim al Moshe v'yomer Ani Hashem v'eiro el Avraham el Yitzchak v'el Yaakov v'el Shaddai v'shmi Hashem lo inoidati lohem. And Rashi says, I appeared before the others, but always Shem Shakai. V'shmi Hashem lo inoidati lohem. Rashi says, Lo nikarti lehem b'midas hamitas sheli, she'oleo nikro shemi Hashem, ne'eman la'am es davarai, she'arei iftachtim v'lo kiyamti. Your generation, you are the ones which will see the kiyum of the haftochas, of the promise that I gave to the others. So this posuk seems to indicate Ve'ero el Avraham el Yitzchak Yaakov be'el Shaddai v'shmi Hashem lo yadati lehem. So which is the shame that HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals to Moshe? That Hashem Havayim. But in last week's Parsha, when Moshe asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I will come before the Jews, and I will say HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent me. And they will ask, what's his name? Who is HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu responds, Eya Asher Eya, Eya Shlochani Aleichem. So which is the Shem that was revealed to Moshe, Shem Havaya or Shem Eya? So the Shem Eya we find only once in the entirety of Tanakh. Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim. And that's a wonder. Why is it only once that we find this shame? What is the essence of this shame that we find once in Tanakh? So Rashi says, Eyamon Begorazu, Eyamon Begorazacheres. The Ramban gives two different interpretations. The Ramoyre Nevuchim, many different interpretations. But the most fascinating one is in Rashbam. And I think I told you about this Rashbam. Fascinating Rashbam. So the Rashbam, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, tell Bnei Yisrael, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. One of the Perushim that the Ramban brings, the Ramban says, tell the Jews they don't need to know my name. They're asking too many questions. All they need to know is they shouldn't worry. Ehyeh imohem, I will be with them. So let me quote what the Rashbam says. ובעניין הזה מזכירים את המלוכים ולא בשמם. ומה שכוסף ביוד K, הפרש פעת בש. So the Rashbam uses the code of Adabash. And he writes, Tzfat, Dafgat, Zahif, Tatzmatz, Pat, Tap, and all kind of funny words. And then he says, Ze ikar oimek pshuto shel makroas alelo, ve'ein magalan ele litznuim. So he conceals his perish. But everybody knows how to figure out Adabash. You take a pen and in 5 minutes you have it worked out. So it's not a seed that I am afraid to share with you. So the Rashbam writes, Ho oimer eheyeh, ve'onu oimrim yehiyeh. Yud b'mkoim vav. And that's the secret of Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. And it's a fascinating Rashbam. So the Rashbam writes, Shem Havaya, in essence, is Yehiyeh, because Yud and Vav are Mischalaf, La'osad Lavai, Yud K, Vav K would be Yud K, Hu Oimer Ehyeh, V'anu Oimrim Yehiyeh. So the Rashbam explains, Shem Havaya and Shem Ehyeh are one and the same. Because when a person refers to himself, he says, Ani Ehyeh Sham. When we speak about another party, we say, Hu Yehiyeh Sham. Ehyeh and Yeh are essentially the same word. So when you speak about yourself, it's Ehyeh. When you speak about others, it's Yeh. So Shem Havaya is Shem Ehyeh. But only once in history did anybody have the chutzpah to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's your name? And it is only once in history that HaKadosh Baruch Hu felt a need to say, what's my name? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Ehyeh. But when we refer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we say Yehiyeh. And that is essentially Shem Havaya. So according to the Rashbam, Ehyeh and Shem Havaya are the same. And with this Rashbam, we understand that Rashi and Parshas Ve'ero, Shmi Hashem lo noidati lohem. And it is Shem Havaya that I revealed to you. And I asked you to convey to Klal Yisrael Shem Havaya. So what is Shem Havaya about? So the letters of Shem Havaya are Hoyo, Hoiva, V'yihiyeh. Kodesh Baruch Hu was forever, will be forever, and he reigns supreme. And that is the way the Rambam Memoira Nevuchim explains Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. The Rambam doesn't tie it into Shem Havaya. That is what the Rashbam does. But the Rambam explains Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I shall be, for I shall be. And the Rambam explains there is only one being that is because he must be. There is only one being that is because it doesn't have an option not to be. It cannot be that he should not be. And that is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Ani Rishon v'ani Achron u'mibarodai ein Elohim. That is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Ehyeh ki Ehyeh. I shall be, for I shall be. Because it is impossible that I shall not be. And there is no other being that is because he must be. And that is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not changeable. Ein bo shinui. Ani rishon va'ani achron u'mebalodai ein Elohim. Takif u'bal yacholes v'bal hakoiches kulam. And that is Shem Havaya. Hoya, Hoiva, V'yihiyah. And that is Shem Ehyeh. And these are all the same. And that is the Shem which HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe, Lech emor lebnei Yisrael, and give them chizuk. I am with them, and when I am with them, they are safe and sound, and there's no koyach in the world that could harm them, that could hurt them when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with them. So b'derech drash and remez, the Imre Emes said, Rashi writes, Lo nedati lem be'midas emitus shali, nemon lakayim devoroi, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. 21 times 21. How much is 21 times 21? 10 times 21 is 210. 20 times would be 240. Add another one, it's 441, and that is Gematria Emes. So that is Lo nedati lehem be'midas emitus shali. So Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, 21 times 21 is 441. That's a beautiful remez, beautiful drash. But in essence, emes is not only truth. Emes is ultimate truth. And the only ultimate truth in the world, and the only rock of the world, and the only thing that is here forever and has all the koiches in the world is only HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is the essence of Shem Havaya, that is the essence of Shem Ehyeh, and that is the shame that HaKadosh Baruch Hu asked Moshe Rabbeinu to convey to Bnei Yisrael and give them chizuk, and give them emunah, and give them betochen. And that is what gives us chizuk for the past 2,000 years in Golus, knowing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with us, and with all the pain and all the suffering, we shall be forever, because that is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised. And that is how we made it through this tortuous journey, thousands of years, L'mala Mederech HaTeva. And many times I quoted Yaakov Emden that writes in the introduction to a siddur, Kiyam Klal Yisrael B'Golos is the greatest of all miracles. And he writes, Chai Roishi, Godel hanes hazeh b'einai, mekol hanesim shenasu l'Avosenu b'Mitzrayim, al hayam u'b'Eretz Yisrael. So Yirotzu, we should be zercha b'kol b'yameinu. Ki yameitzeischa me'eretz Mitzrayim, arenu neflois. We should once again see nisim and neflois b'bias Mashiach tzidkenu, b'binyan beis hamikdash, b'mheiro v'yomeinu. Amen.